Hi there, Lee and Beale, and I will be discussing with you this evening about the group that I held. And the group was held at my home on February the 15th. And initially, I had thought that there was 8 individuals, and there was supposed to be, however, one couldn't make it because of sickness. And as you can hear, I'm getting over this sickness as well. So I do apologize for any hoarseness or whatnot. But the purpose of the group was to help the individuals in the group, come up with some coping skills to help with anxiety. And the anxiety levels, were dependent upon if someone is in school full time or, being the sole contributor financially. So there was many different things that were causing the anxiety. And the setting, once again, was at my home. I did have people set up in a circle. That way it was easy to do a round, which had happened a little bit later. And my relationships with these 7 individuals, they were friends of mine that I did have come together to help me complete this assignment. And, we all struggle with different types of anxiety, and who doesn't want to try to have, some different coping skills with the anxiety. And there was not a co-leader in the group. So once again, this was dealing with different levels of anxiety and how to really cope with them at the completion of this group. In the group, I did initially kind of gauge for like an hour, 2 hours, and it did last a little over an hour and a half because we had some talkative people. So that's always good, but sometimes it can be a little difficult for the leader, so having to cut off and redirect was also needed in this group as well. So the group dynamics, the progression of the meeting, I did start out with an icebreaker, and from working with children, icebreakers are great, so they're also great for adults too. So the icebreaker that I did, and this really kind of shows different levels of anxiety, is one that I really enjoy, and I learned this from a job orientation when I started a job a couple of years ago. And that icebreaker is asking if there's something that you absolutely have to be in control of in your environment. And I actually ended up modeling this for the group and gave the example of the thing that I have to be in control of is making our bed sheets. It's just something that I have to do. If they're made incorrectly, I throw a little bit of a tantrum and become anxious because I have to redo it. So that is important to me, and that's what I personally have to be in control of. So I modeled this for the group, and this led way to have others briefly share or not so briefly share, as I found that one individual actually had multiple stories. So I ended up having to, as I said, cut off and redirect to get the focus back to the group. Even though it was an icebreaker, you still want to make sure you kind of limit the time so that way everyone has that opportunity to share if they want. So some of the examples were, you can only have the television on even stations. There was one that they can't eat brown M&Ms. So they take out the brown M&Ms. So that was really interesting. And I got a little bit of a chuckle too, because I don't know, sometimes brown M&Ms can be a little odd. So that was interesting. So next, after I did that brief icebreaker, I did go into a round that allowed everyone to speak. And I didn't have anybody in the group that was quiet. I'm normally the quiet one, but I was leading, so yeah. But anyway, so I did have one question, and they were able to answer yes or no. And that is if each individual was willing to come up with different coping skills to help with their anxiety. And luckily, each person said yes. So that was great. So that led us into, just kind of having an open discussion of different ways that each person, if they wanted to, currently deals with their anxiety. And what I found out is a majority of the individuals are on medication for their anxiety, and they wish that they didn't have to take that medication for their anxiety. So that was really interesting. And, I was able to speak on that as well, because I've been on and off medications for anxiety and not wanting to be on medication. So that was really interesting. And everyone seemed to be really focused in this group. I don't know if it was because I was being the leader of the group, but everyone was very focused and attentive and actively listening and actively engaged. And nobody really cut anybody off. So that was good. After the group discussion, I did have an assessment that looked at how people handle their levels of anxiety. And that took briefly, it didn't take as 10 minutes as I thought it took, roughly around 6 to 7 minutes. And then I did have the group go into dyads, and with there only being 7 people, I did get to, show the leadership role and work with an individual one-on-one, as we saw in our text with Jacobs. That sometimes is beneficial to, engage another person, is work with them one-on-one. So, they were able to, in pairs, go over how they, handle their anxiety. So we came back as a group and we discussed the assessment, and then we actually, as a group, worked on coping skills. And what we did is we worked on deep breathing, counting to 10, and we also learned about journaling during that time as well. So overall, I felt like, the group was very productive, and it does help when you know people, maybe. I felt like there was a lot of pressure too, and sometimes I would get the giggles or whatnot. So maybe it does help to not know them. As far as, assessing myself, it's definitely a lot easier working with kids. I enjoy working with kids, and they ask some of the craziest questions sometimes, but, they have a different way of seeing things. And I definitely like working with kids in a group setting, and some of the techniques and everything that I used are the same. So that was very interesting, and being able to, use the dyads, I use those with the kids as well. Things that I did well, it was definitely hard for me to have some of those basic leadership skills. Luckily, I didn't have to confront anybody, so that was good. The cutting off and redirecting, particularly the cutting off, was difficult with my chatty person. So that was difficult. I think that might be a little bit easier if it was someone I didn't know. So that was a challenge. And overall, I think it went well. And, I think that they will use some of those coping skills that we did come up with. They, like I said, they're the ones that I use with the kids that I work with as well. Important takeaways that I have. Being able to put what I've learned into practice is definitely a huge takeaway. Being able to put those basic leadership skills, into practice, the redirecting or, working one-on-one with someone. And the icebreakers are so very helpful too, especially if you have some individuals that are a little shy. And I will say that's one thing I'm glad I didn't have, is someone that was, quiet or shy, that it would be a little challenging for me, to kind of directly ask them a question, because I know how that would make me feel. So that was definitely something that I was thankful for. But overall, I think everything went really well, and I look forward to being able to lead more groups with children. Because that's what I do. So adults was definitely a challenge for me. I will say that. It was good. It was just a challenge. So I really enjoyed learning and putting, like I said, what I've learned into action in the group. And I hope to work on confronting as a skill if I need to do that in a group setting. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I'll see you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.